when you think of pirates, when the average person thinks of pirates in the modern context, a lot of times they have a vision of who this person is, and it's typically Johnny Depp. You know what I mean?
Like I was about to say Johnny Depp.
Exactly.
Who's been on the news a lot recently.
Well, yeah.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
The point is, you think about the Pirates of the Caribbean, and you think about his, brilliant and creation of this character of Jack Sparrow. Now, Jack Sparrow is, and I'm sorry if I'm breaking this news to people, a fictional character.
Right.
He's not a real pirate of history. And I remember growing up, as you kind of like hear different, people and things, you learn that some of these characters, some of these icons are not real people, right? So like, for example, Sherlock Holmes. There was a time when I wasn't sure whether or not Sherlock Holmes was a real person or not.
Historical person.
Right, exactly.
Human, yeah.
In fact, because Sherlock is thrown around so much, it took me a long time, like an embarrassing long time, to realize that was his name and not a title.
Right.
Because I thought that Sherlock had just been a title, right?
Right.
So Jack Sparrow is one of those characters that, you might not realize, but this is not actually a real pirate. In fact, it actually was kind of shocking to me to learn that, the character of Blackbeard is a real pirate. That was actually somebody from history.
And it's such a ridiculous name that you're like, obviously that's a Disney character.
Right, exactly. Like and there's so much iconic nature to him. In fact, that's what I love about pirates and that kind of era and these kind of individuals as a whole, is there's so much iconography and symbolism and stories and narrative that's all wrapped around the fact that the histories that exist to tell their stories always come with a pinch of sea salt. You know what I mean? Like there's a large amount of filling in the blanks. We've got kind of this
bleeds in and out of fiction and reality.
Exactly.
This ethereal kind of thing.
We have kind of this Bible, if you will, this kind of textbook of the general history of pirates that was kind of written and was kind of the standard through which we kind of understood who these pirates were. And a lot of that's kind of been not necessarily disproven, but kind of seen through a very specific lens that kind of is really seeking to tell an exciting adventure story, utilizing some of these characters. But at the same time, there are specific historical points that we know to be factual because they're connected to arrests. They're connected to people who
documented events.
Exactly.
Right.
People who were kidnapped. Of course, when, most pirates did meet an untimely demise. So those are all recorded. So we have this mixture of fact and fiction that comes together to like really study these kind of villains in one light, perhaps some kind of heroic elements in another light, but just very complex characters in all of these pirates.
Certainly interesting characters.
Absolutely. So then the question is, this is a long running question. And again, with this series, we're not always going to talk about pipe smokers, but there is kind of this question, were pirates pipe smokers? The answer is yes, definitely yes. We know this to be the case. And not only that, we also know they were big on tobacco. Tobacco was one of those products that was crossing the ocean. And that was, you were looking for sugar, you were looking for rum, and you were looking for tobacco as all of these main hauls. Gold, rubies, silks, and otherwise, awesome. But you're looking for tobacco, you're looking for sugar, and you're looking for rum. And so this was always the kind of a coveted material amongst pirates. And on top of that, because we've had a lot of pirates explored in other media, we see various pirates from history at times being displayed with a pipe and at times being displayed without a pipe. It's a long setup here, but the reason I do that is because we're talking about an era that was filled with iconic people who drove their stories into like our lexicon of popular culture today. And one of those individuals is probably the most well-known of all the pirates out there, probably beyond Blackbeard. You know elements of him because he's partially the inspiration for Jack Sparrow. Whenever pirates are kind of being done, they typically go to this person, and that is Calico Jack.
Who's kind of a prototype, the ultimate encapsulation of, even though you might not know his name.
Well, I would say he's the ultimate encapsulation of like our mindset of kind of the modern pirate.
Right. Right.
But when we take a look at history, we start to see him through a much more critical lens that I think is important.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the most successful millennial pirate of all time, John Rackham, a.k.a. Calico Jack.
Millennial pirate?
He was much more famous for the company he kept and for the fact that he knew how to make a statement as opposed to actually being good at anything. And let me be clear. We're millennials, okay? We're not just
pot, meat, kettle, right?
Exactly. It's a game recognized game. Exactly. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
That's funny.
And just to prove this point even further, John David, when you think in your head of a pirate flag, what is a pirate flag? Just describe it right now.
Skull and crossbones on a black banner.
Cross swords, right?
Or
crossbones is poison, but swords is pirates.
Right.
That is Calico Jack's flag. That he all of these different pirate captains had their own flags.
That was his flag.
That was his.
You're
flag.
saying like that. Wow.
That was like his Jolly Roger became synonymous and still is today as the pirate flag. Yes.
Wow.
And again, he was not a successful pirate.
But he might have had the first pirate meme.
You know what? There's actually might be a point to that. On top of that, too, he also knew how to have a certain flair about him.
Yeah.
His name, Calico Jack, was given to him because, of course, of his propensity for enjoying fine Indian calico in his wardrobe. So he would dress in this kind of calico style, and so he got the nickname Calico Jack.
So he had the get up, he was flashy, he had the logo and the image and had the name. Yeah.
So I mean, all right, so you've got this kind of iconic looking person, the literally the creator, unbeknownst to him, of what we would all come to associate all pirates
with
under.
Pirates. Yeah.
That sort of thing. But again, the question, was he a good pirate? Well, we've kind of spilled the beans on that one already.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't. And it's not just about,
but did he live in his parents' basement?
Maybe for some time. You know what? So he was actually born in England in 1682. Okay. And we don't really know a whole lot about him. So it's very possible he might have lived in his father's basement. There's been a lot of speculation as to who he was before he became a pirate, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, we just don't know much about him up until around his 30s, when he starts really entering into the world of piracy. Now, this is unfortunate for Jack because he's coming into an era of piracy that's coming to a close. This is literally the end of the golden age of pirates. Now, you could also argue it's also the height, right? It's the pinnacle. It's zenith right before it's about to fall. So he's going to be able to enjoy this zenith moment, but he's also going to have to ride the crash as well.
Yeah.
So again, born John Rackham originally, but given the name Calico Jack for all the reasons mentioned already. He was actually quite good at, being something of a pirate's pirate in the communical kind of way. He was a politician amongst pirates, if you will, because he was able to rise to the ranks of quartermaster. Now, quartermaster on a pirate ship is like a second in command.
Okay.
You got the captain, but then you have the quartermaster.
Right.
Now, we've mentioned this terminology before. Do you kind of remember what a quartermaster is?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the kind of the number two on a pirate ship.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, while he's the number two in terms of command,
right,
he's probably the most number one in terms of the most important position with the crew. He's elected by the crew. He's the representative of the crew to the captain.
Oh,
you know what I mean? And also kind of the go-between between the captain and the crew. So if the captain is ticked off at something and the crew needs to know about it before he blows up at them, he goes to the quartermaster to be like, yeah, I'm about to kill all these guys if they don't get their stuff together.
Wow. So it's almost in some sense like the crew's favorite.
Yes.
I mean, or the crew's leader.
We want this guy to represent our interests to the captain.
Interesting.
So Jack was in a really, unique position from that standpoint.
Right.
And quite successful at that. He was successful at kind of gaining support. He was really good. And again, getting to that kind of millennial thing, get a lot of people's attention, get a lot of people behind you, but does it get results? And that's going to be the question. Now, not only was he a quartermaster, but he was a quartermaster for one of the most successful pirates of his day, which was Charles Vane. Now, Charles Vane had his ship was the Ranger. And with Charles Vane, we actually don't necessarily even know what his Jolly Roger was. We don't know what his pirate flag was.
Yeah.
But we do know that he had this tendency of flying both a black and the English flag. So just like a standard black flag as well as the English colors as well.
Right.
And a lot of times they would keep different flags around so they can kind of sneak around if they needed to. And
if they need to pose as this or that in order
avoid
to
suspicion.
Report. Yeah.
Exactly. Their area of operation was actually right outside of New York. Okay. And so they were constantly going on and collecting some prizes there, but they still operated in and out of Nassau as well. This is the pirate capital, the Republic of
Bahamas.
Pirates.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
This was the hub through which piracy kind of found its centralized location. While Calico Jack was very much kind of a popular individual who's, like I said, more of like a pirate politician to some extent, you could make an argument for, Charles Vane was like a pirate's pirate. He was kind of the figurehead of when people looked to like what a pirate should be. They thought of Edward Thatch, Blackbeard, and they thought of Charles Vane. Like they thought of these individuals. Henry Avery, if you're kind of even looking further beyond or before the golden age.
Okay.
So he's with a rock star is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Everything's going well until, like I said, we're starting to enter into the kind of the zenith of the pirates. And, you got the civilized world is like, hey, they keep on stealing our stuff. We probably need to do something about that.
Right.
You got this boy, Woodes Rogers. Okay. Rogers is like, hey, I got a cool idea, hear me out. What if I go to the pirates? Hear me out. I tell them that they don't have to be arrested or hung. Hear me out. I tell them that all they have to do is give up piracy. Hear me out. And then we just take over Nassau because they just give it to us. And everybody's like, that sounds crazy. But here's the crazy thing. It worked. And
wow,
Woodes Rogers goes to Nassau. He's like, hey, I'm going to give y'all all pardons. We're going to pardon every single pirate. All you got to do is come up here, sign a little piece of paper, which we know is definitely going to keep you from piracy. And,
fresh, clean slate.
Right. And you got to think about that. A lot of pirates, they're like, man, you know what? We've been living on the run for a couple of years. We thought it would sound cool, but this is like hard labor at sea. Yeah, we're making more than if we were like working for the Navy or everything else. But it's always with fear that I might be hung, captured, die. Sure. It's pretty.
It's just like a kind of a golden parachute kind of thing.
It is a risky business type deal. And so, yeah, exactly. Having this kind of like way out of like, oh, now I get to like roll in town. I was actually a pirate. The ladies like to hear that. But at the same time, it's like, but I'm like a stable dude now. That's
I've got a checkered past, but now I've got like a, 401k.
Exactly. Exactly. So a lot of pirates, they're like, hey, we're going to do this. Not Charles Vane. Charles Vane is like, what are y'all talking about? We're freaking pirates. We're not going to go sign up.
Make a deal with the government.
Like basically. Literally let the government come in here, set up himself as the governor, give us all like what? You can live free. No, I would rather, I'd rather die as a man than live as a dog. So we ain't doing that. And, to his credit, Rackham was like, hey, I'm right there with you, man. We're going to do this. And so there's kind of a split that occurs on Nassau. You have kind of the pirates that are with Charles Vane that are like, we are not ever going to sign pardons. We're going to do, we're going to ride or die. We're pirates. They actually fire upon Woodes Rogers, who's coming at them with his pardons. Remember, he's not coming to attack. He's coming with an olive branch.
Right.
They tell him where he can stick that olive branch. Not only that, they also do this maneuver called a fire ship. You ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, so a fired ship. Famously, Charles Vane took one of his schooners, lit it on fire, and just like sent it out to sea directly at Woodes Rogers' fleet.
Almost like as a projectile.
Yeah, as a projectile.
As a missile. Wow.
And this was kind of their way of getting past him because they'd already fired on him, and it was a whole thing. Woodes Rogers, by the way, at this point, not a big fan of Charles Vane.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, this event happens. It's recorded in history. Now, granted, it doesn't actually do any damage to the fleet, but it does allow them to get away.
To get through.
And so they go out and they have a ball. They continue their pirating adventures just without the support of the pirate public in Nassau. All of this to say, I've just told you a really like quote unquote harrowing story of Charles Vane, a BA pirate amongst pirates who led a pirate rebellion and told the government where they could go.
Right.
Jack Rackham's just kind of there. You know what I mean? Like he's just kind of there while all this is happening.
He's the quartermaster.
He's a quartermaster.
Right.
Like I'm not trying to downplay that, but like the
he's not the main character.
The protagonist here is Charles Vane.
Right.
And Jack Rackham's kind of there. Okay, so that happens. They're going about their business and everything until one day in around November of 1718. This is just 4 months after that whole big stunt, and they've been out on their own. They come across one of the biggest prizes that they've run, along since they've been going out hunting on their own. This big ship. It's got, again, tobacco. You're talking rum. You're talking sugar. We assume gold on this as well. Like it's a big prize. And Vane's men are hungry. Okay, they want to get a prize. They want to we're pirates. We got to get out there.
Where's the loot?
Yeah, the bloodthirsty. They want this fight. They want this loot. Charles Vane is also, aside from the fact that he's a BA dude, he's also a strategist in his own right. And he's looking at this ship. He's looking at his crew, and he's like, "Yeah, that's a big prize, but they've got more guns than we do. Mm-hmm. If we go, we will die." This is kind of an unpopular decision because they're like, I mean, Charles Vane, you just went up against Woodes Rogers. Like, what do you mean? Like,
but he's trying to make a prudent decision to save people.
Exactly.
Right.
So the crew's upset. He wants to, they want to go in guns a blazing. He's like, I'm trying to save y'all's lives. And they're like, well, I mean, we don't want you to do that. And so a mutiny occurs where it's decided that Jack will take over as captaincy.
Yeah.
And Charles Vane, again, pirate amongst pirates, led the pirate rebellion, is sent off on his own ship with his supporters. They didn't like kill him or anything like that. They let him go.
Yeah.
And he goes off unto, if I'm not mistaken, although we probably need to do an exploration of him at some point, I think a pretty healthy retirement somewhere.
Okay.
And I think I could be wrong. And so maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I think if I'm remembering correctly, that Vane actually eventually does take the pardon, ironically.
Isn't that interesting? Wow.
So anyway, so Vane is sent off, and now
Calico Jack has kind of usurped his power.
Calico Jack has
taken his crew.
Taken the boat, taken the crew. He's got it all. Man, this is a big moment, right? Like, Millennial just got that executive level position.
Right.
Okay? He just got the corner office, right? Now, here's the thing. While he was really good at making people like him, he was not very good at practically anything else.
Right.
Okay. And, like, this is just the case. Like,
yeah,
they go off, they maybe take a prize here and there, but nothing, like, they're like living on scraps to some extent, right? Until finally one day they come across what appears to be a pretty big prize. And again, crew's ready to go. They want to take this thing. Bit of a problem is that this particular ship is, how do you say, like right off the coast of this large port town. And Jack has this great idea that they're going to go in, they're going to sneak in, and they're going to steal the ship that's parked in front of a town. Now, the problem with stealing a ship in front of an entire town is that people watch you steal the ship and everybody knows who done it.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like, and not only that, but they've got their ships right there ready to go, and like crews ready to go and hunt you down. Like, they've got literally all the information. They got you red-handed, and on top of that, they've got you like visual for miles.
And they can get you.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the biggest prizes, this ship that he's able to take, and his crew is like really, really happy. Immediately, the governor of said town puts out a hit and hires pirate hunters to go and look for Calico Jack and get their ship back. That's exactly what happens. In like a few weeks' time, even, they get hunt down. It is a question as to whether or not Jack just like bailed off the ship,
right? And
like his crew just hid out in the woods while they like took it back. Like, oh no, come in, we don't want to fight. Like, we don't know exactly what the situation was. There's also one report that Jack and his crew had gone to shore and were drunk on the beach. And when they woke up, it was like, dude, where's my ship? I kind of like that interpretation a little bit more personally.
Honestly, that sounds a little like Jack Sparrow.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a bad situation. It was poorly executed. The prize goes back. The crew is pretty much disheartened with Calico Jack as a pirate. They're like, you know what? Hey guys, let's just go back for the pardon. Like, what are we doing? We don't know what we're doing. Like, let's just quit, right? One major failure, calls it quits. Millennial pirate, right? Like,
I think I've had enough. Like, all right, do you have any dinner?
So they go back, and this is kind of tricky business. All right. So like, while of course Calico Jack was not necessarily the captain, this is the crew of the notorious pirate Charles Vane, and they have to go to Woodes Rogers to get a pardon. And as you may recall, Woodes Rogers is not really a fan of Charles Vane.
Right.
As you can imagine, this would probably extend to his crew.
Right.
But again, Jack's a politician, right? Like, he's kind of a pirate politician. So he goes to Woodes Rogers, he seeks an audience with him, and he basically says, hey, listen, you hate Charles Vane, right? I hate him too. He made us do all this crazy stuff to you. We didn't want to do that. Like,
yeah, let's be buddies.
We wanted the pardon. Clearly, we wanted the pardon. We're here. We wouldn't be here if we didn't want the pardon. Clearly, Charles Vane made us do it. So maybe, like, as the most revenge you could ever do to Charles Vane, you give us all pardons. And here's the crazy thing. It worked.
It worked.
It worked. They all got pardons. They all got to go and live happy lives ever after. Until... Now, in all of these stories, especially as we're talking about some of these men, there's always kind of a pivotal moment in their life. And that moment, when she comes along. So as I mentioned, this is 1719. Jack has been pardoned and he's able to kind of go about his business, right? Well, along comes a lady. And let me tell you about this lady. All right. Much like at least one very prominent millennial who's sitting here, he's out punting his coverage. You know what?
Yeah.
Like both millennials that are sitting here, he out punts his coverage hard here.
No, that's right.
He meets this fine redheaded lady, all right? We're talking Anne Bonny. Oh, yeah. Anne Bonny. Now, here's the little problem with Anne Bonny. She's actually married. She's married to John Bonny. Now, John Bonny is what we call in modern terms a snitch. All right.
Oh.
He a snitch. So he used to be a pirate, but he actually rats out pirates to the government, to Rogers and such. And Anne Bonny, she has a thing for the bad boys. She's not liking this snitch situation.
Yeah.
She's kind of sick with her husband, right? She has no respect for him. She's like, I mean, like, why aren't you a real pirate? Like, I want a real pirate.
Right.
Like, you're not a real pirate. You're over here snitching out real pirates. Then all of a sudden, who walks in? Calico Jack, one of the most
dashing.
Look at him in his calico and everything else. And on top of that, you used to sail with Charles Vane. Tell me about Charles Vane. So anyway, so she they fall for each other. They're like, okay, you know what? Let's make this a thing. Let's make it legal. You break it off with your husband. You marry me. That's cool. So they go to John, not John Rackham, but John Bonny. And they're like, hey, she's like, I don't love you anymore. Can I get a divorce? And he's like, oh no, I don't want to get a divorce. I don't really care if you love me or not. It's what, the early 1700s. Who cares if you love me? It's
right.
We're not doing that.
Right. We're not getting a divorce.
So Jack is like, Jack Rackham is like, hey, I got an idea. Hey, John, as you just mentioned, it's the early 1700s, right? How about I buy her from you? Is that an option?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So John is like, yeah, interesting. It is the early 1700s. So this is just a conversation that we're clearly having. But no, I don't want to buy her. Have you seen her? I think I'm going to stick with my wife here. Thank you very much. So Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny are now stuck in this situation. They're in love and they want to be together, but they can't be together because the law won't allow it. Well, funny enough, old Jack Rackham has a way of getting around the law, and it's called being a fucking pirate. And on top of that,
what pirates care about the law?
Exactly. And on top of that, this is like Anne Bonny's like super fantasy on top of this, right? Like she is all about that pirate
dashing
life.
Bad boy comes and steals me away from this
terrible abusive husband, like
right.
This, all off the stage. And on top of that too, this guy who was supposed to be like this pirate swashbuckler who's a snitch, so they go off, they form a crew.
That's hilarious.
They head off on their own. And now we see kind of the return of Jack Rackham on the seven seas as a pirate. Now, Anne Bonny is notable for a number of reasons. For one thing, we don't have that many female pirates in history.
Yeah,
and
sure.
All the female pirates that we have all find their way on Jack Rackham's ship. In fact, for example, Anne Bonny is really notorious not just for being a female pirate, but also one who's exceptionally good. Being the wife of an abusive husband kind of toughened her up in kind of a ways that she was ready to unleash some rage when it came to swords and pistols.
Mm-hmm.
So she was quite the fighter. On top of that, she was also something of a cunning tactician, like finding different ways to kind of mess with their enemies. There's one story that if we do in the future a deep dive into Anne Bonny, which I think we should. There's one story where she actually used kind of like literal straw men as a way to kind of like create a narrative for their enemies to be able to get them to retreat, and out of the situation. So
almost
she was
like decoys. Right?
Yeah, she was really big on like thinking outside the box because, she was kind of coming into that pirate life in a very different kind of way.
Yeah, sure. What an interesting character in her own right.
Well, that's exactly my point. Again, this is somebody who, especially for the day and age, far more notorious than Jack Rackham, than Calico Jack. So now he's married above his pay grade. He was working for a much better pirate. He's married to a much better pirate. They're off on the seven seas. Everything's going fine. And Bonny, she's a little she's out here, right? She's out here. And there's this young new pirate named Mark. Mark Reed. Okay. And
the affections of the heart.
Well, Calico Jack can be a bit of a jealous man. He sees Anne Bonny spending some of this time with Mark Reed. He's like, I didn't even want to hire Mark. I didn't want to bring him on my crew. And then Anne starts like vetting for him. And now she's like spending all this time with him. And like, what's going on here? And so finally it's getting like, it's about to come to blows. And so he's like, Anne, like, what is up with Mark? I am going to throw Mark off the side of he's about to get marked. I'm going to throw him off the side of this ship is what I'm about to do. And then Anne is like, okay, you need to know something about Mark. Mark is not a dude. Mark is named Mary Reed.
Whoa.
Mary Read famously hid her gender so that she could be a pirate without being a female on a pirate ship.
No way.
Which is probably one of the main reasons when she heard about Anne Bonny, she was drawn to join the crew of Captain Jack Rackham, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's really fascinating, but we have on Jack Rackham's ship
That's incredible.
two
women.
Like, not just two women, but the two most prominent, famous pirate females of all time.
Wow.
On this ship. Like, again, these two women are far more fascinating than Jack Rackham himself, much like Charles Vane that came before them, right? Like,
much like our wives are in relation to ours.
Exactly.
To us.
They had to overcome adversity, and again, in the form of Anne Bonny in particular,
Yeah.
just a fighter, like fierce through and through, and just Jack's kind of there. He's just kind of there.
He's hanging
man.
out. He's got his logo.
He's got these women who are like basically carrying him. Again, millennial pirate.
He's got his logo, got his fancy coat. You know, he's surrounded himself with all the right people.
Exactly. So anyway, they're going about their business. They have a very short run, as honestly most pirates did in the Golden Age. Like we love this kind of like broad fantasy of the Golden Age of piracy, of being like this grand era and this everything else. But the reality is, it was kind of a short amount of time before everything was starting to fall apart. And remember, at this point, the Golden Age is pretty much over. I mean, Woodes Rogers came in. He had already passed out the pardons.
Right.
It was time for things to kind of come to a close. And the funny thing about pardoning yourself is, or getting your pardon, is you write your name down. We have on record that you said you wouldn't do this, and now you've done this. And on top of that, you were like Charles Vane's dude, right?
Yeah.
So again, even though Jack himself was not as notorious as perhaps he would have liked, or certainly not as good as he would have liked, he certainly was somebody who was constantly, the eyes of the law was constantly
He was
on
affiliated with the wrong people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the right people, depending on what your, views are from that standpoint. But regardless, they put a hit out on him, and eventually he was captured at what has now become known as Rackham's Cay. This is where in 1720 his crew was subdued and captured. Famously, Anne Bonny and Mary Read as well. They went out fighting. They were still captured, but they were fighting their way through. However, Jack Rackham turned himself in with little to no resistance.
Wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Just complete win. When it comes time for their trial, as you know, pirates don't exactly meet a happy end for the most part.
Right.
But when it came for the trial, Anne Bonny and Mary Read had a little bit of a benefit, had a bun in the oven. So, funny thing, they can't execute you if you're pregnant.
Right.
A little bit of a technicality they never really considered, because there weren't as many known female pirates at the time.
Yeah.
Not to say there weren't, there just weren't as many known. So when it came time for them to be tried and they were going to be hanged, Anne was like, yeah, I'm pregnant. And by the way, if you try to hang me again, I can guarantee you right now I'm going to be pregnant before you try to hang me again. So you best let me go. Funny enough, it worked. And she actually was able to get off pretty much scot-free, lived several more decades, and retired somewhere on the beach.
Wow.
Their child, one presumes at that point, Jack Rackham's child, went on to be born. Somebody somewhere has the DNA of Anne Bonny and Calico Jack Rackham, which I think is fantastic. I would love to know.
That is amazing.
The history there. But regardless, so she's able to get off. Jack Rackham, unfortunately, because he's not pregnant, he's a dude, so he is like he doesn't exactly have that way to get out of this situation. He's chilling out in prison. Famously, Anne Bonny comes to see him one last time. Jack finally seeing her, in his moment of deep despair, looking up, seeing this gorgeous red-headed wife, the love of his life, who he has returned to piracy for, thinking that she is there to comfort him in his moments of solace. But she, of course, famously says to him, "Had you fought like a man, you need not have hanged like a dog."
Wow.
Cold ice.
Turn the knife, man.
Yes, sir.
That's incredible.
He hung until he was dead, 1720, November 18. He was 37 years old.
37.
Yeah. So Jack Rackham, as I said, what's most fascinating about him is not his skills as a pirate at all, but the company that he kept. He was connected with, again, Charles Vane, one of the most successful pirates of the era, like celebrated, a pirate amongst pirates, as because of his association with Charles Vane, he was part of this pirate rebellion in this kind of historied moment. He refused the pardon. He took the pardon. He refused the pardon again. He goes off and he marries one of the most notorious pirates of the day, in Anne Bonny, like somebody who is still today just like a fixture in inspiration for pirate lore and everything else.
Yeah,
and on top of that, because of not Jack freaking Rackham, but because Anne Bonny was there, you have Mark, aka Mary Read, who comes along, and we have these two female pirates on this ship. So here's the thing about Calico Jack. We paint like him in this interesting place because of all of the company he kept.
Right.
But when you really take a step back and look at him, he just kind of failed forward. He was not a skilled pirate. I remember the first time looking into this character because I associate him with Johnny Depp's character of Captain Jack Sparrow. You know, they have that whole thing. That must be the worst pirate I ever see. And then you take a look at him. He's like, that's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen. And you think maybe that's going to be the case for Calico Jack. And it's not. That's got to be the worst pirate I've ever seen. Like, he's just not that good from that standpoint. On top of that, and perhaps because of the association that we have with the Jack name, because of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, when you see Calico Jack appear in popular media, I'm thinking specifically of Star's Black Sails series, he's one of the most... your favorite character. He's like charismatic. He's awesome. You see that kind of pirate politician kind of thing at play. And you also see his failure play out, but you're rooting for him in a way that I don't think you would root for the historical Jack
exactly.
Rackham.
Right.
Another version that I think is notable in popular media, because he is the one that we see smoking a pipe quite frequently, is from the Assassin's Creed game with Black Flags, where Calico Jack is just kind of a drunk and he's just kind of slovenly all over the place. And honestly, probably closest to the historically accurate one, except for the fact that I would say, based on his history, I think they probably overdo it a little bit too much in that game in terms of him as a failure.
Theatrical way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere in the midst of all of these fictional interpretations touches who the real Calico Jack was. And as I mentioned, what I find most fascinating about all of this is that Anne Bonny survived with their child in tow. And that I like to think that someone out there today has the DNA that connects them with Anne Bonny and Calico Jack Rackham. And I just think that's fascinating.
That's wild.
So yeah, Calico Jack,
dude,
man.
Calico Jack, what a wonderful, I mean, certainly fascinating story about one of the most famous, if not accomplished, but certainly dramatic pirates in history. Man, that's wonderful, man. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
You know, I'll put this little additional piece in here as well. So, I think I mentioned on a previous episode, we were Mark V actually wrote in and kind of made mention of my Captain Jorvik, fictional character and that sort of thing. And I mentioned like in that series that I'm kind of still trying to figure out how to get out of my head. There's a precursor to the Jorvik story that takes place 300 years before, and it's all around this concept of a pirate civil war. And it's between these two captains, Captain Rack and Captain Shay. And Rack is loosely based, as the name implies, off of Captain Jack Rackham.
Yeah.
But a very different version of the character. He's also kind of starving and he's desperate. And so he goes and he kind of gets high on opium and he gets this vision of a pirate ruler. And he believes himself to be the pirate king. He wants to unify the 5 seas and become kind of this new pirate king. And so you have Shay, who is kind of competing against him. Shay is the protege of a pirate captain, the most successful pirate captain of that age, Blackstone. And Blackstone has a daughter named Stella Blackstone, who is highly based off of Anne Bonny. And so like there's a lot of these characters there's touch points and inspirations that I have found that really fuel my imagination.
Right.
And it's one of the reasons I love talking about pirates specifically, is because it's just such great fodder to like spark the imagination and that sort of thing.